Saturday, May 11th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I want to talk about a few books that I highly recommend. I've done book streams in the past. They're like live streams where I talk about books that I like. I've done videos with a list of all the books that I recommend. Today I'm going to look at 5 books that I think are my favorite books about the world, how the world works, money, economics, philosophy a little bit. Well, the first one is The Law by Frederick Bastiat, the classic blueprint for a just society, so it's more about philosophy. Second one is by Murray Rothbard, What Has Government Done to Our Money? And the Case for a 100% Gold Dollar. This one of my all-time favorites that I think has helped me kind of see what's going to happen in the system is this one here, Fiat Money, Inflation in France, How It Came, What It Brought, and How It Ended by Andrew Dixon White. One of them is a very recent one, which I've read this year, was recommended by one of the viewers. And it's more like a fiction thriller, but it's based on what's going on right now in economics and in the monetary system. And I highly recommend it. I couldn't put it down. It's like a kind of depressing sometimes, but it's a really good book. It's The Mandibles, A Family, 2029 to 2047 by Lionel Shriver. Highly recommend this. It took me just over a weekend to finish it. Really great book. The last one, but not least, is The Tower of Basel by Adam Libor, where he talks about the Bank for International Settlements and how the central banking cabal really works, how they were behind both sides of the war. World War II. Really good book. Before I go a little deeper into the books, I just want to look at some of the headlines that came out last night after the close of the market. Well, Trump pulls the trigger, begins process of raising tariffs on all remaining 300 billion China imports. So it's going to be interesting to see what the markets do on Monday. I think, and this is what I wanted to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the technical analysis and look at the charts for the stock market. And before I go into the charts, I want to talk about a candlestick pattern in charts because I think I've detected one of, an interesting candlestick formation on the weekly charts for all the major stock market indices in the US, and it's called the spinning top candlestick pattern. And I'll go through what this article here on forextradingstrategiesforyou.com says. A spinning top candlestick pattern reflects indecision in the market, which simply means that buyer and sellers are pretty much at even. Spinning top is a candlestick pattern in which a substantially shorter body surrounded on both sides by 2 long candlestick wicks. In other words, a spinning top candlestick is often regarded as a neutral candlestick. And then the person who wrote this goes on to say, my opinion on spinning top candlestick pattern. But for my case, I don't consider a spinning top candlestick pattern as a neutral candlestick at all. Maybe in the perspective of buying and selling power, yes, it is a neutral candlestick by many traders simply because the sellers and buyers even out each other during the formation of the spinning top candlestick. And he goes on to say, I consider a spinning top candlestick as a potential reversal candlestick in the context of where it forms on a price chart. And he goes on to say, for example, number 1, if I see a spinning top candlestick pattern form on a major resistance level, I would consider it as a potential bearish reversal candlestick. and I would place a sell stop order a few pips under, he's using FX term, it could be pips or ticks, under the low of the candlestick. If price breaks the low of the spinning top candlestick and heads down, it just adds further confirmation that the downtrend may be just about starting. 2, similarly, if I see a spinning top candlestick form on a major support level, I would consider it as a potential bullish signal. So the inverse of the potential top. So now let's go to the charts, because I started looking at these charts earlier today and late yesterday as well, and I found it quite interesting, especially the candlestick charts. And I'll start with the Dow, and I wanted to find out what kind of candlestick that was and what it meant. So here you go. This is a weekly chart of the Dow, and you can see here that prior to this week, the Dow was having a tough time there, making, at near the all-time highs. It was a resistance, and last week we formed the spinning top. It's not completely symmetrical, but it's pretty good. You can see that the length of the wick is very similar to the above the candlestick and below the candlestick, which means that there was a lot of volatility, a lot of buyers and sellers, and it ended up like balanced, like that guy described. But I guess the level to look at next week will be the low from last week, which is the bottom of the of the candlestick pattern there, and it's potentially a very important top in the markets. So that's how I see it. I'm not saying that everything is going to implode and collapse. It's still early days. I think it's only a potential. That's the thing about technical analysis. So that's the Dow chart, and I've looked at some other charts. So let's look at the S&P as well. Same kind of spinning top candlestick pattern there. The lower wick is a bit longer, but it still pretty much fits the criteria of a spinning top. And again, prior to this week, there was good resistance there in the S&P, and it's kind of failed in that resistance. NASDAQ. The NASDAQ composite is an interesting chart because it actually was breaking out and it failed, of course. And the spinning top here is very balanced in the NASDAQ, actually. That's, as you can see. That's what I think. Last week just showed that there's uncertainty about whether the market is going to go up or down, but a spinning top points to more potential of a move lower next week. So that's where I'm at technically. Am I going to do something about the market next week? Maybe. I did some puts early last week, which worked out okay. But I have to say, put options on the S&P, you need to be careful, and because it's very volatile. When I first put on the trade, the value of my holdings dropped quite sharply, but I waited and then added on Tuesday, and then when the market started dropping, I took a nice profit. It could have been higher, the profit. I would say early early Thursday or Friday before the market rebounded. So yeah, downside looks like a good opportunity in my opinion, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. What about the books now? I'll start out with the fiat money inflation in France. It's not a big book. You can find free PDFs online, or you can buy it on Amazon. So I'll read through the summary here in the back about the book. It was written in the early 1900s, and Andrew Dixon White he was the one of the founding, if not the founder, but he was the president of Cornell University. So this is what it says. In 1790, the French people, by general acquiescence, embarked upon what they believed to be a harmless experiment in currency inflation. The results of this action are vividly described in Dr. Andrew D. White's book entitled Fiat Money Inflation in France, How It Came, What It Brought, and How it Ended. The story of fiat money inflation in France is one of the great interests to legislatures. The story of fiat money inflation in France is one of great interest. The story of fiat money inflation in France is one of great interest to legislatures, to economic students, and to all business and thinking men. It records the most gigantic attempt ever made in the history of the world by a government to create an inconvertible paper currency and to maintain its circulation at various levels of value. Well, you know, if he was writing this book today, he would say it was, you know, the second most gigantic compared to today, right? It also records what is perhaps the greatest of all government efforts, with the possible exception of Diocletian's, to enact and enforce a legal limit to commodity prices. So, and it shows that the same thing is happening today. And how do they do that? Through the manipulation of the markets, of the futures markets, of precious metals and other commodities, the central banks. Just read the end of this summary. Legislatures are as powerless to abrogate moral and economic laws as they are to abrogate physical laws. They cannot convert wrong into right, nor divorce effect from cause, either by parliamentary majorities or by unity of supporting public opinion. The penalties of such legislative folly will always be exacted by inexorable time. While these propositions may be regarded as mere commonplaces, and while they are acknowledged in a general way, they are in effect denied by many of the legislative experiments and the tendencies of public opinion of the present day. The story, therefore, of the colossal folly of France in the closing part of the 18th century and its terrible fruits is full of instruction for all men who think upon the problems of our own time. You know, all the QE, all the Operation Twist, keeping rates at zero or negative, everything they're doing, you know, the central banks, also the legislatures by, you know, spending huge deficits. It's only a matter of time. It's very difficult, of course, to predict when these things are going to happen. But as the summary says, you cannot beat the law of nature, economic law, through diktat or through fiat like we have today. And that's why I think it's a great book to read. The other one is the recent one I told you about, which is a fiction, but it's pretty much based on our economic and monetary circumstances, not only now, but going forward. So what does it say here about the book in the back? The U.S. national debt, well, so what does it say here? It says it's 2029. The U.S. national debt has grown so enormous that it can never be repaid. The dollar is in meltdown. A bloodless international currency war will wipe out the savings of millions of American families. Their pending inheritance turned to ash. Each member of the formerly formidable Mandible family must contend first with disappointment, then the challenge of sheer survival as they navigate a society in ruin. A frightening yet scabrously funny look at a nation's not too distant future from the pen of perhaps the most consistently perceptive and topical author of our times. The Mandibles, a family, 2029-2047, is Lionel Shriver at her incisive best. Really recommend this if you haven't read it yet. The other one is What Has Government Done to Our Money by Murray Rothbard of the Austrian School of Economics. And basically this book you don't have to be an economist to read it. It's very clear and very, how can I say, easy read. And it just talks about the history of money, how money evolved, and what government has done to our money. Highly recommend this. You need to read this book, in my opinion. And this is more about philosophy, but economics as well. The Law is one of my favorites, along with the Fiat Money, Inflation in France. This was written in 1850 by French statesman Frédéric Bastiat. So what does it say here? The law created order in my thinking about liberty and just human conduct. Walter Williams. What else does it say? Statesman, essayist, and economist Frédéric Bastiat was a renowned champion of individual freedom and the law. First published in 1850, is Bastiat's most famous and enduring work. The law has been acclaimed for more than a century as the classic moral defense of liberty and limited government. Here is a timeless message of immutable principle in the immortal words of one of history's most courageous thinkers and brilliant writers. So yeah, I mean, nowadays very few people in the mainstream ever talk about Frédéric Bastiat. They talk more about Thomas Piketty, the French, this French economist nowadays who's written a book about inequality. He's the big star. But I would say that Frédéric Bastiat in my book is number one. And why do I think it's a good book and important to read? Well, because he shows how governments, big government, actually corrupt the law. The law is supposed to protect private property, the individual, and you cannot run a state or a government and corrupt the law, you know, through heavy taxation. It's like legalized plunder, he calls it. So highly recommended, The Law. The last one is The Tower of Basel by Adam Libor. And it's about the Bank for International Settlements, which is actually not a Swiss bank. It's not a French bank. It's a supranational entity. And it has sovereign status at the UN. It was created by a treaty by the major countries in 1930. It says the shadowy history of the secret bank that runs the world. The BIS, you know, comes across, they market themselves as just like a bank that's helps regulators around the world, the major banks, but they're not. There's a lot more to the BIS. So the major thing I got about this from this book is that all the wars, all the crises we have, they're all orchestrated, in my opinion. Some of you might think it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but I truly believe that. And the fact that all the major warring countries kept representatives at the BIS throughout World War II and did business together and helped finance both sides just goes to show that it's a game for them. And I know I don't want to sound disrespectful for all the people who have fought in wars, who thought they were fighting for, you know, lofty ideals. But I'm sorry to say this book has kind of confirmed what I always thought, you know, that the wars are bankers' wars and big corporations' wars to enrich themselves even more. So highly recommend that, Tower of Basel. Before I go, I'd just like to point out, because I do look at cryptocurrencies in a while, and the cryptocurrencies are doing very well today. I saw earlier in the day, Bitcoin was racing ahead and the other coins weren't doing too well, but now the other coins have caught up. We're almost up double digit in all the major cryptocurrencies. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you share it far and wide with people that you think might enjoy this kind of content. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great weekend. Take care. Bye.